Learning Adobe Illustrator was so much easier than I thought it would be with Paige Picaro helping me, because she walked me through just the things that we need to know and skipped everything else to make it simple. Nice. Whew. I learned so much about the technical specifications of fashion flats. When I was finished making my flat, I was able to turn around and immediately, with the same skills, make a croquis and a downloadable PDF pattern. Sweet! Because she's a design student, she makes a lot of little mistakes along the way. The exact same kind of things we're going to do. And this is so great because these things are usually too small for the experts to even think about and could stump somebody like me for hours. So it's brilliant. And she's a super patient, wonderful teacher. Take it away, Paige.
We can click Create New. And you just create. It can be whatever size you really want. Up here, you'll have your projects windows. So you can pull them, you can drag them, you can kind of adjust them wherever you'd like. And then when you're done, you just kind of put them back into the bar. It takes a while to learn, but once you get it, you can organize everything to your own liking. I typically look up a reference image, a basic t-shirt, but then after you make it, you can adjust the lines and make it more stylized to your designs.
I just have to say that's brilliant already. I never would have thought of doing that, and I can see how helpful that's going to be. So
it's more so like you're tracing almost, but with this tracing, it's your design. It's however you want it to be. So someone's already made this t-shirt. You want to create something new, different. So I'll just hop onto Google usually, and we'll look up t-shirt. Right. So we see this t-shirt. We'll take it. I'm going to drag and drop it onto my desktop. And then here, we will take this image and kind of drag it, drop it back into Adobe. Now here, we've seen this kind of in Google Docs, other areas. You can kind of adjust the size of the image to your liking. And then you can just zoom in. And then afterwards, you can make your flats pretty small, but you can always expand them. You are going to go into your pen tool. So the pen tool is going to be kind of a key in making these lines and shapes. So this is your pen tool. And basically this pen tool, you just click, it follows where your mouse is, and you can drag, drop, little segments how you'd like. Now to curve lines with the pen tool, you're going to click it. You're going to hold down, like long hold kind of on your key, and then you'll be able to curve your lines. So this is what gives us that wonderful shape. And if you look at that blue dot in the middle of this, that's kind of moving with the line, that's the center point of your line. So that is really a key indicator of how much curve you'll get based on how you move your mouse. And kind of wherever that's positioned, it's going to follow that as kind of its, guiding light. So to make our t-shirt, the layers tab is also important. This is our layers tab. We can add layers, we can lock layers. We have our image on this page. We're going to add a layer, which means that we can work on top of it. And we want to lock this bottom layer, which basically makes this image of the t-shirt, not move around, not go anywhere. On layer 2, we're going to get our pen tool. And the stroke is basically how thick or thin the line is. So typically protocol for main binding kind of garment lines, it's going to be 1 to 0.75. And for any stitches or seams or kind of like more stylized lines, it's probably going to be a 0.25 stroke rate. So it basically just makes your line smaller, thinner. So that's kind of standard. I usually work with a 1-point line because I like it to be thicker so I can kind of see where I'm working, but it can always be, adjusted afterwards. So we can just start kind of outlining basic shapes. I like to kind of just stylize it a little more. I'll probably like curve it a little bit. But then you'll see, what is this white stuff filling the space. So with Illustrator, you want all of your lines to be connected. And this allows for the garment to be filled and for you to be able to put color. Because if there's not a spot where all the lines are connected, you won't be able to fill it with, you know, a cool color or cool pattern. We're getting to the shoulder. If I'm like going through it, you know, more quickly, I won't do as many like small lines to be, you know, more precise. So this is our shoulder curve. So right now we see that solid red dot, and it's kind of moving with our mouse for the seam on the shoulder. And we'll just go like that. All right, so now that we have that, this piece can kind of move freely about. We can put it to the side if we want. We can, you know, move it wherever if you need to see your work.
I'm confused because the line's open still, but it's connected.
Typically, like you can move around to be able to see a little bit better. Here's where the collar is, so I'll move it. I like the collar to be separate from the garment. It just allows me to fill it easier. I'm going to take our pen tool. And I'm just going to stick to the traditional, you know, t-shirt scoop neck.
Is this a different layer or is it in the same layer with the other lines?
I'm just putting it in the same layer. It's honestly your personal preference. I keep the image layer typically just as is. Let's say I'm content with the sleeve and I want to put it over and I don't want anything to be adjusted to it. That's when I'll like lock the layer. But, you know, you can do this all in one layer if you want. I have friends that like to do every single layer with like a different pen stroke, just so if there was something that they needed to go back on, you know, they could pinpoint exactly where it is. Typically for the collar, this pink line in the middle here is going to be the center line of your entire project. So when I set up where this t-shirt was, I kind of place it directly in the center of Illustrator. And I just know I'm in the center of the t-shirt. So with this, I'm going to kind of go along the curve. And that created a little line there. I'm going to click on the center because I don't want the curve to be there anymore. It kind of will flow with wherever your pen goes. So after that, we're going to make sure it's lined up with the top. That's that pink line. It's just showing that your design is even, it's level, it's going to be the same height horizontally, and you're going to curve it. Oops. All right, so now we have our line. Another way you could do it is, if you like to be symmetrical, is only do half of the flat, which making only half of the flat allows you to flip it over and the pieces will mend together, and therefore you save work and it's going to be symmetrical. So that's what I will show you how to do. So you're going to double click and you are going to do transform, reflect. So reflecting is basically just flipping it over, and you want to make a copy of it. So you'll keep the first one and it'll make a copy of the other one. So now we have two of these little half collars. Now we're going to connect them. I'll just kind of create a line that merges the two black lines. You just take your pen tool and you kind of will fill the space with it. But with the collar, this white space here is not, it's not going to be filled. It's going to be filled underneath here on this bottom kind of section of the collar. I'm just going to move this out of the way real fast. Is we're going to kind of create the top of the collar. And we're going to work downwards to where this point is. And we can make it as thick or thin as we'd like. I usually will go kind of halfway and do it just to get more precise. Okay, so that's what the collar kind of basic shape will look like. Since I'm trying to do the whole flat, I'm going to show you kind of a little bit faster. So it's not 100% perfect. I'm going to stay connected to this red line, taking it, making sure it's level with this other shape and curving it. And then click on the top, and I'm going to move it to create that kind of collar shape. And we're going to connect it. but also kind of move our mouse to make it curved as well, looking at that red dot. All right, so now we'll have our kind of basic collar shape. This is going to be all connected, so this can kind of be free moving. I like to just move it out of the way just so I can really focus on the actual shape of the garment. I'm going to move the sleeve back on here because that's kind of what I want to work on. Now with this, to be able to fill different areas and different sections, I kind of like to do just a quick outline of the collar, because this piece right here is going to be just put on top of it. So it doesn't really matter what kind of line it looks like. So I'm just going to kind of simply kind of trace the collar line area and kind of connect up. And it does not have to be perfect. Oops, my apologies. Sorry. Okay, so here's our little sleeve area. If this white part bothers you, or if you're thinking, man, I'd rather see the shirt underneath, you go into your, by the stroke where you adjusted how thick or thin your line is, you go to fill, and you're just gonna click no fill. So this can be easier or harder for you, depending on what you like. I personally like to be able to see sometimes, how much progress I'm making and how much white space. And that also lets you catch, did I fill it all? Did I connect all the lines? For right now, though, I kind of just would like to see the shirt and, where my lines are. So I'm not missing any crucial details, or if I want to add anything, it's easier to see without a kind of a white block covering it. With our pen tool, with kind of arm seams, I would like to kind of just curve it. So I'll connect it. So I have a line here, and I'm going to go kind of midway up, give it a nice like kind of curve. So we can do that with our flat and just have it kind of a curved line, kind of stylized, or we can take our pencil or paintbrush tool. And our paintbrush tool basically allows you to kind of like draw, as you can see. But when you look at this line, you're thinking, it's too thick. What, So you adjust your brush thickness and thinness, and you can kind of go into different sizes. You can open up this panel more, and you can kind of see, what more stylized lines look like. So this brush called the oval brush, that's kind of what most people use for, stylized lines on your flats. So stylized lines will be used to show drape. It's used to show kind of texture and movement kind of the pieces. And this is more so when you're showing your designs to people that potentially would like to buy them and manufacture them. So we're going to go back into our pen tool. We'll go up, and you want to make sure everything is level.
Would you be able to do like one side, like if you started in the center of the neckline, how you're tracing it, and like went to the middle point, and then to do the flip, so then your other side is exactly identical? Would you be able to do that and then connect that whole line?
Yes. Okay, so here's our kind of center line. We're going to take this object, we're going to double kind of 2-click hold, and we're going to go transform, reflect. We're going to make a copy of it. So we didn't just flip over the first one. We have a copy of it to be able to put it on the second. And we're going to kind of line it up, see where our lines are. Right now, they're not intersecting, so we can kind of layer it on top. So in order to join the lines in the path, we're going to take this line, which is on kind of our right side of the flat, and that's our anchor point. We're going to connect it to this other path. So the other pathway is the left side of the garment. It doesn't show it's really connected. You kind of just have to connect the right side's red line to the left side's red line. So right now I can see that when I go to this side, you see the whole thing lines up in the red. Now, if I take it off, it doesn't. So if the whole thing kind of like turns red, I guess, and you can see all your different lines, that's when you know you've like successfully kind of connected it.
You also mentioned something was your anchor point. What does that mean?
So the anchor point is, so if I go here, I'm just showing you just a line. So this red kind of square here is our anchor point. So it's not going to move. It's going to stay. So that allows us to have flexibility to curve this line or to, move this line freely. So then once we release it, this is going to be an anchor point. So it's just kind of a solid point and it's going to stay there.
It's kind of like whichever point you happen to be working from right now, that's your anchor point. So
yes.
It changes. Okay.
So now we have our collar, and you can also use your keyboards, your up and down arrow keys to get more precise, because sometimes they know with mouse movements, it can be more drastic. So you can get very precise, movements with your keyboard keys. So then after that, I'm just going to move these all downwards with my design. So now we have this kind of back of the collar half area we need to fill, because when we're filling that flat, it's kind of going to be a darker color, just to show that it's the back of the garment. It's not part of the front. So we're going to take our pen tool. So this is our collar area. Right now, I'm going to utilize my layers, and I'm going to lock this layer because I'm going to be working kind of on top of it a little bit. I'm going to add a new layer. So now we're working in layer 3. The other 2 layers are locked. So whatever I do on top on this layer, it's not going to affect the bottom. So we're going to take our pen tool, and I'm just going to go under, and I'm going to create kind of like a little bit of like a half swoop. And I'm going to kind of arc it. So it's going to be, my apologies. This is going to be kind of the back of the collar. Now I'm going to touch that anchor point so it locks and stays. And I'm going to go to the intersection point where that pink line is kind of the middle of the garment. I'm going to curve my line. I typically will like to go underneath the collar all the way. You can do whatever shape you really want in this area just to kind of fill it. So now we have kind of, you can make the shape neat or messy. It's kind of just going to go underneath. So now we have this shape, and we're going to fill it. We click the fill tab. It's by stroke. And typically you'll fill it with just kind of a light gray color. So now we're going to go back into the layers panel. And you need this to be underneath. You don't want this random piece to be covering your collar. And what we're going to do is we're going to move it underneath layer 2. So now we can move this, and it will go underneath what we just worked on. And then typically, since I know I like that where it's at, I like the look of it, I'll lock the layer. So now layer 2, that's where our collar is, our shirt is, all of that.
Where we have the collar and the shirt, layer 2. How do you know which one's going to go on top? Is it because of the order that you created them in, and whatever's created later goes on top, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's kind of the order that the layers are in. So I know layer 3, I just made the collar in that layer. That's just the only thing. Whereas layer 2, I have all of these like design lines located within them. So if I see how layer 3 is put above, it's going to be over our collar. Layer 3, when I move it below, it's going to be below. So I'll lock the layer because I like the way it looks. I don't want it to move while I'm doing kind of work on top. So then if we wanted to do kind of our own pattern, we could take the brushes tool, and these are just the preset brushes that Adobe will give us every time we open up, a file. What's great is we have the internet, and if you want to get, different brush strokes, usually you can find them if you just, Google search.
Can you show us an example of finding a brush stroke on the internet?
Yes. The most common one you'll be using is a dashed line for, stitches, seams.
I think sometimes you can download packs.
Yeah. And there's also websites where you can download, free tech packs and free kind of layouts for design. So whether it's technical packs where you have all your measurements, or there's actual flats that you can download Some of the websites you do have to pay for. If you have an Adobe account though, usually they'll have something called Adobe Stock, which you can get your stock photos, you can get brushes. So all of these kind of are brush strokes that you can get off of Adobe. So I'm going to go for this one. I like the stitches. These are common stitches that we see. These are embroidery. These are kind of what like a serger would look like. All right, I'll just download with our 30-day free trial. All right, so now our download has gone down here and it's as an AI file, which is what we want. So I like to just move it to my desktop to have it. Sorry, I'm just moving other work out of the way. All right, so now we have that as our Adobe file. We're going to double click and you're going to see it kind of pop up in our menu bar where we have our different projects and everything. Sometimes it takes a long time to load in just because of how big or small the file will be. Then we have our brushes. Right now, we're going to be working with the single stitch and then the double stitch as well. So I'll start with the single, take it. We're going to Control C or Command C if you're on Mac, and that just copies it. We're going to go into our other project and we're going to Command V or paste. So this is telling me that my layers are hidden. So I'll have to go back into my layers, open up layer 1, and then we'll be able to use it. Okay, so now we have our brushes open. These are just the preset ones that Adobe gives us. So we're adding a new brush so we can drag and drop it. And you typically want to just leave it as a scatter brush. Just click OK.
How did you find it in the brushes? How did you know it was one we just got?
Okay, so let me go back to our Adobe stock and I'm going to select it. I'm going to Control C or copy. And then we're going to go back into our other project. We're going to Command V or paste. And then we're going to take this image. We're going to hold it down and drag it. And in here, you'll see it kind of light up blue. And you'll see kind of where we are placing it. You can put it in between. You can put it kind of wherever you like. I just like to put it at the bottom so it's easiest to find. So we're going to drop it.
So it doesn't give it a new name or a picture that's descriptive. You just have to remember where it is.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. Here, you can kind of adjust every little aspect of it. For instance, this one, though, this is like a denim and it comes standard with Illustrator. And with this one, like it's easy to tell. Right now, we're working on a single dotted dashed line. So this one, you kind of will hover over. This says a denim seam. If you hover over this one, it says one needle stitch. And this one, that's just standard. So you'll know that it's going to be the right one just by seeing kind of the two dotted. For our seams on the sleeves, it's typically a single stitch. Our stroke is at 1 right now, which is not what I'd like. I'd like it at 0.25. So we'll just adjust the arrow keys kind of down. And we can just kind of hold, click, and drag. You see that green line there? That's kind of the line we're tracing. Okay. So with our lines, I could trace it and we could see, oh, why is it curved? Here's a way to fix it. So when you're holding down your line and when you're making it, if you click Shift, this will give you a straight line. So if we click Shift, and from there, we can kind of click it. And by creating like that straight line, we can rotate it and also adjust the length of it so it fits the full sleeve. So you'll see this kind of curved arc arrow with double sides, and you can adjust it and you can see the degree to which it's tilting. So now we're going to click and drag it downwards, adjust it more to where we like. Now you see that it doesn't fill the space. What's great with the dotted line tool and the brush tool is that you can kind of expand your shape and it will keep the pattern going without increasing the size. So right now we have just adjusted it to be a little bit bigger. Now we don't want to have to make a line on the other side. We like this line. So we're going to Control C. We're going to go to the other side, Command V. So now we have this line. And you can either invert it and reflect it, but typically what I like to do is flip it myself. And with our keys, you can move your line down. So there's our single stitch on the sleeves. For the bottom of the t-shirt, usually what's standard will be double seams. So in our brush pack that we have downloaded online, we have that. So we are going to Command C, and then we're going to go Command V. Now we have our great brush. We're going to take this. So this, with all the little brushes in it, it's brushes, and we'll drag and drop it. You can kind of see like the two kind of smaller lines, which is a little bit more helpful. Now we're going to take our paintbrush tool. I'm going to hold down Shift, and we're working on a straight line. So we can see there's those two lines. We can go ahead and move this up or down. This is a little bit too big for us. How we can fix that is click on this little kind of listed kind of look, and it says scale spacing 45%. When we're looking at the spacing, we're seeing like, that's probably like an inch of spacing between the seams if we were putting it on a garment. So we can adjust the spacing. I'm going to try 25%. We can kind of adjust it to where we'd like. And see, that is kind of making it smaller. And, you know, that would be typical standard with how big the gap would be. Because before we were looking at like an inch gap, which is not accurate for, you know, what a t-shirt would be. Now I'm going to move this because I would like it to go all the way to the end. I'm going to check the other side just to be sure. All right, now we have that. Typically for the collar, you'll have single stitches along the top and the bottom. So with our collar, we're going to do kind of more stylized. So I'm going to click on the single stitch brush, and then I'm going to click on the paintbrush tool. So now, right now, we're in the single stitch. And what we're going to do is just kind of stylize, draw our little line. So it's way too big. For the stroke, make sure that it's at 0.25. So we're just going to click on it. And right here, we'll see that it is 2.5. So it's always good to just double check. Down here, this says 1 point. It did look a little thick. So we're going to adjust it down to 2.5. And the way that this preset worked with us having to scale it, we can kind of just play it by ear. So I'm going to keep it at 0.75 because the scale was put to 35. So the math kind of just mental math checks out. And we're going to check this other side. It's 0.25 as well. This is at 0.1. We're going to bump it down to 2.5. Much better. We're going to take our paintbrush tool. And I kind of like to work in tiny sections just to be able to get very precise and accurate lines. And we're just going to keep dragging along this line. Oops.
What kind of mouse do you use? I feel like that's a big part of it as well.
So currently I don't use a mouse. I'm on my Mac trackpad. I'm just using kind of that flat mouse pad that's on a MacBook computer. We have that. We're going to do the top. And I also have a lot of like tech packs, or not tech packs, just flats that I have made. And I can share them with you guys. I could send you an email, and if you want to send them out, they're kind of a start, and you can kind of edit the flats to make it a little bit easier.
Oh, yes, please. That would be wonderful. Like if we had, you know, basic shirt, basic dress, you know, that we could add on to, that would be a huge time saver.
We have a service called WGSN, and WGSN is a service that all the designers are using for, you know, trend forecasting, colors, upcoming styles. And that website, by having access to it, allows you to be able to have a whole library of computer-aided designs. I can definitely pull flats that I've done and get you those just so it's easier when starting out. And from there, you can kind of just edit them to your liking and add to your own designs. Typically in our collar, there's going to be kind of this structured kind of seam. So we're going to be making kind of that right now. And as you can see, it's kind of a single stitch. So with this, I'm going to copy this line just so it's easier. So we're connecting these two sides in two pieces. Now that we have this, we want to make sure that it's just filled. So we're going to fill it with this gray color. And we're going to rotate this back down. So right now it's on top of our design. We don't want that. So we're going to go into our layers tab. And we are going to move it underneath. So we have that. I'm going to expand it a little bit just so it's underneath this collar. Okay, great. So that kind of gives us that shape of that kind of reinforcement line. Let's get this underneath. All right, so I just copied it. I realized I kind of made an error with my layers. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to lock all these other layers real fast. I'm going to paste it into the new layer. And each layer will kind of give you a different color. So if you notice, like we had a lot of red lines, that first kind of steps we were doing, it gives you different colors per each layer, which kind of helps you to organize it. Now that we have this layer, we're going to put this, let's see, underneath. Yeah, and this is where layer organization kind of comes into play. You can also name your layers. So layer 4, you can layer collar. You can layer seams, stitches, stylized lines, which also helps. Now for our stitches, lines, we're going to go to our paintbrush tool, our brushes. We are going to use a single stitch and then a single stitch on that bottom of the seam. And that's kind of what I was showing you with that reinforcement. I'm going to zoom in just so I can see. And we're going to just, oops. All right, so our stroke, way too big, adjust it to 0.25. And from there, we'll have our stroke, and we're just going to keep going. And then, so this is the front of the flat of the shirt. And then to create the back, we basically would copy. So now we're going to be looking for the back of the flat. What I did was I copied top and then I pasted it just towards the bottom of the flat as well.
Oh, could you really quick show me how you copy multiple layers together?
I basically just unlocked all the layers except for the picture that I used. I make sure this bounding box is around all of my work. And then I'll kind of just look just to see that everything is highlighted and colored. So right now there's bottom seam isn't. So we're just going to double check. I'm going to Control C and Control V. So now we have that. I'm just going to delete this real fast. Oh, there. And now I'll take this design that we kind of just moved over here and we'll just move it. So now for our back of the color, we are going to go into our layers. We don't need any of these color lines. So we can just kind of move these out of the way, delete them. We don't need this color. Oh, and then, so what just happened was that when I copied and pasted it, I had a layer that was locked. And because it was locked, it just caused me to wonder, why can't I edit the color? Why can't I, go in and change it? So I checked back on my layer panel and I saw, that layer was locked, which I did not want. So now I'm going to copy and paste. I'm just going to delete this out of the way. Okay, now we have our color.
It's really helpful when things like that are likely to happen to me, happen to you. So I can be, oh, okay, that's something to check for.
All right, so for the back of the shirt, since we've already created this collar line, it's not going to be that big of a dip in the back. So with our shirt, if we're looking at it, it's going to be pretty flat, you know, across the top, and it's going to have kind of a scoop neck. So right now we're having a scoop neck down here. So we're going to go in to our layers, and we are going to click on the line, and then we're going to see that this arrow key is kind of filled in. And here's where it is beneficial if you make a lot of small lines instead of like big lines like I've done. So here we have all these little lines. We're going to click on this anchor point. We're going to click delete. Click on this anchor point, click delete. And then this one, we're going to click delete as well. And that way, since all of our lines are connected, we're not deleting the entire thing and having to kind of restart. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to click on this line. We're going to select this arrow. And so here, if I could have done a bunch of little dots and we would have had to delete that, but I kind of do it in one motion. So we're going to delete. So now we're left with the top. And this gives us kind of a really nice canvas to be able to work on. With t-shirts, what's nice is that, you know, the front and back of the flats are virtually kind of the same, except for the collar line. When you're doing more complex designs like handbags and other things like that, you'll have to think about, you know, what if the zipper's in the front? What if it's a flip side? Which you'd kind of have to kind of redo your flat almost for the back side. Because as you know, with purses, you know, sometimes they're not symmetrical. Sometimes they'll have a flap that comes in the front and kind of different factors, and there could be a back zipper. So that's where you kind of have to think, like, stylize your flats and make it kind of unique to what your design is. So with our back, we're going to make sure that our stroke is at 1 to align with the rest of the flat, so it's not going to look different. And what we're going to do is kind of just do kind of like a little bit, a very slight curve, just to fit kind of with what, you know, a normal t-shirt looks like. So for the shoulder seams, you want to go to your kind of high point shoulder, and you're kind of going to go, you're just going to follow this kind of natural arc downwards. I guess I did more of a stylize, and I kind of just showed where it creases, like where it would be in like your armpit area. So this flat is not, it's not too stylized, but if you did want to do a stylized flat, you can download a croquis, which is, you know, the basic form. It's usually like your 9-head sized figure for fashion illustration. And, you know, you can do your flats with someone with their hand on their hip. It's just kind of how you want to display it. But if you did want to send it to, you know, factory or manufacturers, you do want it to be flat. Now, if you have long sleeves, so if this was like a long sleeve t-shirt, you do not want it to be touching that side seam right here. You don't want your flat to just kind of fall down. You need to have it kind of be sticking out slightly, just so there's no issues with the vendor and when producing it, because they'll sew it to be very close to your side and you'll be stuck with little movement here as well. So there's just little things about it. Okay, so then with our kind of stylized seams.
There we go.
Yes, so that's kind of the top of our collar. And then we're going to go to our paintbrush tool. And we're going to make sure it's in the single stitch. We're going to adjust our stroke down to 0.25. And we are going to kind of zoom in just to be able to see a little bit better. Yeah, see, the stroke is way too big. Okay, so we're looking at, let's do foliage. Sure.
Okay.
So we're going to drag this and we're going to drop it into our file.
And because it's Adobe, it patterns out right. Like you don't have any repeat weirdness or anything.
Yeah. And if you wanted to like create a pattern, which is like, it's very difficult, but you can basically arrange it to be a half drop repeat. So your pattern, let's say you have an object here and an object here.
Uh-huh.
You don't want it to be kind of parallel. You want it to be kind of offset,
Okay.
you know, down here, kind of filling that gap.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's what's called like a half drop.
Half drop offset.
Yes. And then we'll add this. Okay. So right now our layer's underneath, so that's why it's kind of a different color, as you can see. Let's go into our layer tab, unlock this layer. We're just going to delete this t-shirt, you know, that sample one we were looking
done with it. Look, we got t-shirts now.
Yes. And then
What we got a few stitches to put in and we're done.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we can go back into our swatches. We want to be able to fill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We want to fill in these individual pieces. Filling in the flats, you might have to go in and, let's say, fill in where the collar was. So for this collar, for instance, like this was a whole separate little area that we had made, and it was kind of a box. You'll have to go in and individually fill that as well.
Because that's going to be like a different color. That's going to be like white or something. Because
yeah. So if we want, we can go in and fill it with white. And what we do is just drag and drop the white there. And then that way we have white in there. But like this t-shirt, for example, it's this blue color. And it has
so it's filled with
the
blue.
Same color blue inside.
Yeah. But with a pattern, it wouldn't be. They would have some kind of solid.
Yeah.
Cool. And now that you have design skills, I think you should practice them right away. And I have the perfect place for you to do that. We're doing a sketch contest 4 times this year. So there's one running right now, I'm sure. The way it works is we show you source garments, you draw a fabulous design based on them, and the winner gets their own personal tailor to make that outfit for them in their size.
I like what you do.